help us make sense out of all this and see how these things tie together. We have back with us today Colonel Douglas Macgregor, defense and foreign policy analyst and former advisor to the Secretary of Defense and highly decorated combat veteran. Doug, as always, welcome back to the show.
Well, I think we can try to explain some things, but if you want us to make sense, forget it.
Okay, fair enough. Fair clarification. And I think that actually some of these comments are going to show just how right you are on some of those. President Trump this morning went on Fox and Friends and was kind of giving a lay of the land to his favorite outlet there about where things are. First of all, we'll talk about the Iran war. Turns out, actually, we're in pretty good shape there. And we'll start off with the most important financially aspect of this, which is the Strait of Hormuz, and along with all the oil and gas products that go along with it. Good news, Doug, we're in control.
Well, Iran doesn't control the Strait. We control the Strait.
Mr. President, are we right that the no merchant ships are getting through right now, maybe 3 or 4 a day when you need about 100?
The only ones that get through are the ones that we want to get through. They're the only ships that get through, Brian. We have a blockade that's so powerful that nobody can get through.
Nobody can get through. Now, Brian Kilmeade, Doug, in front of the Rare Times, actually tried to push back a little bit, and it turns out he was much more right than we think. When Trump's saying that we're in control of the Strait of Hormuz and we're in good shape, this is from the last few days. This is important, not just in the numbers, but where they're passing. We've had information from Kepler and a number of other places that say fewer than 10 ships have passed through the Strait since Sunday. 25 had just 3 vessels, the 25 July, and then the 3 days, 22 through 24 July, 3 vessels per day. But here's the important part. The Southern Corridor, the one that the United States set up outside of the Memorandum of Understanding that was not included in that, according to analysts from Windward and Kepler, commercial shipping along the southern route, despite being escorted by U.S. military, has effectively ground to a halt. The Northern Corridor, a handful of vessels still navigating the straits, are mostly utilizing the Iranian shipping lanes. So there's not a whole lot going out even then. But President Trump said ours is like this blockade, but some is going out there and nothing is coming out on our side. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't know what to make of it, except that President Trump is not in the business of telling people the truth about events in the Middle East or anywhere else right now. Remember, this is the quintessential salesman. So everything he's connected to is a tremendous success. Everything he talks about is always a winning hand, and so forth and so on. The problem is that the rest of the world knows the truth. We don't control the Strait of Hormuz. Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. And for him, that's a very difficult thing to admit, because that means that we have lost our control and influence over the global energy complex. We just don't control it anymore. It by definition, and if you look at what I'm sure you're going to bring up in a few moments, the destruction meted out to the Saudis and others in the Gulf in terms of oil infrastructure and refining, becomes very clear that Iran has absolute control. And we are in an unfortunate position of not being able to do anything about it. So I understand he doesn't want to admit that. But unfortunately, that's true. And that leads to the discussion of what will be openly discussed in this meeting in Washington with Netanyahu.
And, even before we get on that, I want to go down a point you just mentioned there. And this gets back into something we've talked about before, but there's a new manifestation of it, that the oil price has gone down significantly here since the oil trading opened back up Monday morning. And that's odd, because the news out today, you mentioned Saudi Arabia, they admitted that because of some of the Houthi damage, missile damage to their Yanbu and several other oil reprocessing centers, had taken about 4 million barrels a day, at least temporarily, offline. And yet the price of oil went down, which by any other normal time, that would have caused a spike, because that means more oil is not going to get out. Whether there's the Bab el-Mandab is open or closed, if you can't refine it, you can't get anything out. What do you make of those two opposite indicators?
Well, we also saw another exercise in shorting oil. So friends of Trump that are on Wall Street, and many of these people are part of the larger Zionist billionaire club, have all made lots of money as a result of his ability to manipulate the market. I think we're reaching an end of that. It's going to end. It's going to end very abruptly and badly. But right now, they're willing to play along on the assumption that somehow or another we're going to win. that we will walk away victorious, because if you go to Wall Street, you talk to the people that work there, they say, oh, well, taking care of the Strait of Hormuz, that's a job for the Navy and the Marines. That's a non-issue. That's all going to work out. But there's no evidence for that, but that's what they believe. That's what they believe because that's what Washington is telling them. And these are traders. These are people who are trading in commodities, making lots of money. These are not people that wore hard hats on a drilling rig. These are not people that have ever seen the oil fields up close and personally in the Persian Gulf or anywhere else. This is a common problem in New York City. People sit behind a desk. They're in Wall Street. They're looking at data and statistics. Those things are easily manipulated, but it's not going to last much longer. And I think that's the real message. Nothing is leaving the Gulf that Iran doesn't want to get out. And when you look at the oil that's leaving, it's Iranian and it's headed largely to China.
That's exactly right. And just to put a finer point on that, this is even lower than I thought. This is the current live price here, $78.60, down another $3.95 or 4.7%. And you can see that. I mean, this is after the Saudi Arabia announced today that they had all those millions of barrels offline while they're going to try and repair that stuff. And it just should never happen here. And that just seems to imply that somebody is definitely pulling some financial strings here, because otherwise that just doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, there are two other myths that we need to explode. One is that that's the real price. The price of oil coming off the ship that docks with a full load is $140 a barrel, right? That's the paper price. That's Wall Street's perception. So that's number one. Number two, there are no new oil pipelines being installed, no new oil infrastructure. I hear people saying, oh, we're already building ways to get around all this, and new pipelines are popping up. No, they're not. No one is investing in the region. No one will put a dime into the region until the war stops. Come on, wake up, smell the coffee. What's the point of trying to put a parallel oil line in anywhere when the Iranians will discover it and they can destroy it in a few seconds? What's the point? So there's nothing good happening at all. So when the truth really strikes home, and it's going to in the near future, imagine the shock when you're looking at $150 a barrel or higher. Because if you listen to Jeff Curry and other people who are familiar, Pilkington's another one, these people have been in the oil business, trading business forever. They know what's happening. They know where we're headed. It's not where we're looking at that chart right now.
Yeah, and I wonder if you could, I want to go down that path that you just mentioned here, because last week we showed on one of our programs that Jesse Waters was bragging about how President Trump had gotten the prime minister of Iraq to have all this oil infrastructure and investment by the United States into Iraq. They were going to build this pipeline that was going to bypass the Strait of Hormuz. There's some other pipelines. And so we're going to take all the leverage away from Iran. But I wonder if you could just talk militarily, given the capabilities that we know Iran has with all these short, medium, and long-range missiles scattered throughout their country. Even if you make pipelines, unless they're all totally underground and there's nothing above ground, it seems to me that the refineries aren't going anywhere. And whether there's a pipeline or a ship, you can still take that stuff out with the same ease. Is that not correct?
Oh, no, that's true. But let's stop and ponder that statement for a second. This is Iraq. Iraq is Iran's ally. Wake up. The Iraqi government, how many times has the parliament in Iraq voted us out of Iraq? How many times have we been directed to leave the place and take our forces with them? The Iraqi militias that we talk about all the time that have attacked us and others on several occasions, they're all poised to march in and seize control of Kuwait. I mean, what does he think he's talking to? I mean, this is just complete and utter nonsense. The Iraqis are not going to do anything in any way, shape, or form that could hurt Iran. Iran is their eternal ally at this point. So I don't know what he's talking about. I think, everybody in D.C. is inside a bubble, and I think everybody's smoking crack cocaine. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, I guess it makes sense in terms of finances, because you can make a deal all day long if you want to. And If it benefits Iran, that's or is Iraq, that's fine, but that's not going to change the internal dynamics that you talked about that we ushered in with the removal of Saddam Hussein all those years ago with the 2003 war. But I digress. Let's stick with the one we got here, though, because we have those issues at play right now. The Strait of Hormuz is in control of the Iranian side, and there's nothing we have been able to do to stop it. Not the 40 days, not the blockade, not the MOU, and then not this 13-day, attempt a mini offensive that we tried. That didn't make any change either. Now then, there's been, 3 or 4 days now we haven't struck, and I think we're trying to figure out what to do. Well, one thing that a lot of people want to do is that let's go back and finish the job. So all kinds of people have been saying that and begging Trump. I showed one over the weekend, Sid Rosenberg on Fox News, literally begging Trump to go in all out, to include a ground formation, invade the country. It's shocking to do that. Well, President Trump this morning addressed that possibility.
I can knock out the power plants. Within one day, all of their power plants would be gone. And I let them know that, with negotiations. They said, look, people want me to do that. I think I get almost the same thing out of it as doing it. But the problem is they'll never be able to, I think about 91 million people without power, without bridges, would have to live. And it's a very, very delicate balance. Yeah. So I think we have a very strong position right now. They know I'm going to do that if they don't make a deal. The bridges are going to be gone. I would say in 2 hours, most of the bridges, the major bridges, will all be gone. And the power plants in one day. If I can avoid doing that, I'd like to do that.
Yeah, he could. I mean, we have the wherewithal, we have the missiles and everything else that can do that. But the Iranian side has already said it's an eye for an eye. If you do that, we're going to hit all the infrastructure there too. Do you think President Trump is not aware of that he doesn't believe it, or is all of this just posturing and he's not going to do it?
This is the man who said, this war may be over in 3 or 4 days. The Iranian regime, may just implode quickly. If it doesn't, what are we talking about? 2 weeks, 3 weeks? They can't stand up to us. I'm going to make a civilization disappear overnight. I mean, come on. Why listen to anything the man says? Right? The man is going to do what Netanyahu wants him to do. Let's be frank. That's where we're headed. What does Netanyahu want? He wants the war to continue. Zelensky is joined at the hip with Netanyahu. They are part of the same cabal. What does Zelensky want? He wants the war to continue. For it to continue, he needs more missiles, more drones that he can hurl at the Russians. Now, let's get real and look at what is and is not possible. Iran's goal in the war, number one, was to survive. They're not deluded. They never harbored any illusions about their real power and influence. They understood that the best they could do was to defend themselves. Dan, they've done that. They've proven that they have survived. They realize that they've won. That was the point of the MOU that Trump signed and then walked away from, unsurprisingly, because it effectively said, okay, you get what you want, you won, we'll go along with it, we'll tolerate it because it's in the interest of the global economy. Well, that went away. He can't tolerate that. Now, what's goal number two for the Iranians? They need to finish the job. And what does that mean to them? That means that you've got to remove the United States from the region. How do you do that? You smash all the bases beyond repair. You make it patently obvious that any attempt to come back into that region and reestablish yourself on the ground is an impossibility. We are not fighting the war we were fighting just a few weeks ago. Donald Trump is fighting a rear guard action to try and preserve what little is left of our military, political, and economic power and dominance. And there's not that much left anymore. His attack on Iran was an acid test for our military power, our strength. We could have avoided it. We didn't need to do it. It was not required. But Netanyahu and his agents in the United States insisted upon it. Trump owes them whatever, and so he's done it. They're back, and they're going to tell him the only way this war ends is with the complete and utter destruction of Iran. I would turn that around and warn everyone that if he indeed does proceed It's not the end of Iran. It'll finish us in the Gulf. That's absolutely certain. But it will be the end of Israel. And I think that privately, Netanyahu is worried about that, but he doesn't know what else to do. And the simple truth is the same for Ukraine. Either we give them more to sustain them for another month or two, or they too will go out of existence. And if we give them something to sustain them for another month or two, half of which will be stolen and end up in private bank accounts, they too will be destroyed. The handwriting, as we say, is on the wall. Ukraine is destroyed. That nation is finished. And oh, by the way, Iran is victorious, and a new order is going to emerge in the Middle East. And I would tell you that over the next few months, it will be obvious that that new order consists of 4 powerful states: Russia, China, Iran, and Turkey. I predict that Turkey will finally get off the bench and demonstrate that it is part of that axis. And that is the end of us and the finish of Israel in the region.
Well, that certainly may well be the case, and we'll see how things play out. What seems to propel that forward is if we make some foolish decisions here coming up. I want to point out, Gary was showing you those images from just a few minutes ago, I think, in the White House, where they're meeting between the two delegations is going on. I want to remind everybody that prior to the start of this war, Benjamin Netanyahu came to Washington, and he had some intelligence that said he found out that the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, was going to be in a certain location on a certain day, and that President Trump had to act then. That's when he had to strike. Now then, we have, prior to Benjamin Netanyahu getting here, another piece of secret intelligence that Iran is about ready to start a new nuclear weapons program at Pickaxe Mountain, and he's basically going to suggest President Trump strike that. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that makes perfect sense. That is totally in line with everything that we've been discussing. This is the last desperate attempt to keep the war going. Now, I don't know what is inside or under Pickaxe Mountain. I don't know what the intelligence services say. I don't think it matters. I mean, our intelligence services have reported pretty consistently over the last several years there was no evidence for a nuclear bomb being developed by Iran for use against anybody. Well, they can say anything they want, and that's what's going to happen. Again, the point is, this is it. Trump has got a real problem because we are not simply low in missiles and precision guided munitions and so forth, whether it's Tomahawks or JASSMs or any number of these exotic weapons. We're going to scrape the bottom of the barrel. And by the way, the oil situation is not good. What Wall Street believes and what is real are completely distinct from each other. The real world is going to come down on us very hard in the very near future. And that's going to have an impact on the bond market that we've discussed in the past, which Gundlach and Groman and a host of other people, Ray Dalio, have all pointed to and said, Armageddon is on the way. Nassim Taleb has said it before anybody. It's coming. It's inevitable now because Trump is running what's left of us in the ground. He's doing it because he understands he's fighting a rear guard action. We have lost in Iran. We have lost in Ukraine. When I say we, I'm talking about the United States, because we put the full faith and credit and power of the United States behind these very stupid, unnecessary wars. All of our allies are on the skids. Everybody's going broke. Nobody has any money. There will be no great mobilization of Europe against Russia. But what's happened in the meantime? China, which has profited enormously from our stupidity, is the rising power in the world. It is de facto the greatest economy in the world today. In terms of purchasing parity, absolutely, without question. So then we turn away from China, we look at Russia. Russia is in superb condition because the Russians have husbanded their resources. They have moved cautiously and deliberately, although I think that's about to change. And I guess we'll talk about that in a minute. But then you also have to look at Iran. Iran was supposed to have gone under several times. Its population was supposed to have starved and died and begged for mercy several times. The Iranians are not interested in talking to us anymore. No one is calling Trump and asking for talks. He's desperate for them. They're not going to happen. there is only one way out for Donald Trump and Iran, and that is for us to pack up our things and steal away into the night, to disappear quietly. If we don't do that, it will get worse for us. The rest of the global energy structure will be at high risk, much of it in the Gulf region destroyed, not just for a year or two, not for 3 or 4 years, for a decade or more. And when we leave, it's very obvious what happens. The only power in the world with the wealth, the expertise, and the power to come in there and change anything, make anything right, rebuild anything is China. And the Turks are watching it. They're seeing who is winning and who is losing. It's only a matter of time. They want to be on the winning team, and they will join. And that'll be the end of it. And this thing we call Israel, which is a product of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, will be on the skids. They'll have a choice put to them. Either you live within the broader regional framework that we define on our terms, or you go away.
Yeah, and of course, with their 200 nuclear weapons, I think that they can either just burn the whole thing down, or they'll fall into line there. But that's going to be an ugly situation, which I think we're headed toward. I don't disagree with your assessments there.
Large numbers of Israelis are buying up as much of Cyprus as they can. They're moving to Greece. They're moving into Serbia. They're moving into a number of different places, Argentina, obviously. So that tells you something about the faith of the Israelis in their own future.
Yeah, and one wonders if that's ever going to get through to Netanyahu in time. Before we skip moving on that topic, because I do want to go to the Russia-Ukraine portion of that, because they are directly linked. We showed you the meeting there with Netanyahu that was happening. One of the other things that I'd like your view on here, however that comes out, and I think we have a pretty good idea how it's going to come out, that meeting, probably going to be something bad for us. But what really irks me, just as an American, is this statement here by Smotrich, Bezalel Smotrich. This was in actually the military.com this morning. Israeli minister says U.S.-Iran war is best for us without Israeli involvement. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich said that plainly what other Israeli leaders have communicated more cautiously, the current U.S. war benefits Israel most when American forces do the fighting and Israel remains outside the direct exchange. This just drives me crazy, Doug, because we just talked about how Israel prompted President Trump to forget about America first and go Israel only and start this war. And then he allowed Israel to stay out of it and let our people pay the price in blood, let our population pay the physical cost from this with our tax money or borrowing and everything else. How can President Trump let this continue on, to let them stay on the sidelines and only allow our people to pay the price for a war we don't need?
Well, you will remember when we were in Saudi Arabia in 1990 and 1991, that the Saudi government, its spokespersons, its ruling elites, openly referred to the United States Army on the ground in Saudi Arabia as their white slave army that had been purchased and equipped to defend Arabia. And that's why they were there. And that when they'd done their job, they would leave because, of course, Arabia is wholly Islamic territory. Now you're hearing effectively the same thing from the Israelis. And I think he's telling you the truth. There's been an effort to create the illusion that what we do and what the Israelis do militarily in the region are disconnected, that one is disengaged from the other. Well, if that were true, there would be no reason for the meeting in Washington right now involving Mr. Netanyahu with President Trump. People aren't stupid. People in the region know that. And it's interesting that the arrogance has reached the level that it has. I think this is a level of Israeli Zionist arrogance that perhaps we've only seldom seen, certainly not since 45 on this scale. And he's telling you the truth. And he expects this to happen. And President Trump is obedient. And given the fact that he is evidently under duress, he will comply.